That's good. All right, let's just hope that this thing actually. Do you ever use these things?
No, never.
They're
So it's a hard drive?
It's a hard drive.
Take one.
And phantom power, maybe.
Okay.
From Speed, I wanted to talk to you about I think was it a Van Halen sample? You were playing like something in the background with the guitar riff, and it was representing fast, and it was the solo, and then you said stop, and the music stopped. And I wondered, when you're producing something like that, do you have that in mind when you're talking and doing the actual investigation, or is that something that happens completely in the studio? Like, do you make the stop and the slow down when you're making the edits and when you're determining the speed of the piece?
It's like it's a combination of both, but it's mostly the latter. Like if I were to take this conversation that we were having right now and edit it later, there's something about when you're out of the moment and you're listening to it, you start to register the like micro events within that bit of speech, and you hear like the little punctuational moments where like you're talking and suddenly you kind of rise and then you fall, and you've just concluded a thought or something, and so inside of that thought there's like a little crescendo of meaning, and then it stops. And so when you're sitting there tweaking, and I'm sure you find this, like you start to hear the little events within things, and you want to like use the music to punctuationally underline that stuff. So when there's something that's really important happening, you yank out the music, and so suddenly the listener's just deposited into this silence, and they have to kind of like, they don't have the music as a crutch anymore to help them make the meaning, and so they have to do it themselves, and it's very disorienting and powerful. But then you use the music to build to that silence so that you drop them off and then boom.
Just you'll understand the rhythm of the thing.
It's great though. I like this idea of a triad.
Each of you guys started in the South and then made this move up north. And there are a lot of sort of stereotypes that you could go to about what you learned along the way and all the rest of that. But what did you learn about yourself when you kind of started that migration? You know, Jad, you in Nashville, Matt, you in Texas, and you come up north.
For me, Texas was rock. You know, it was ZZ Top, like rock radio. I grew up with that kind of encompassing everything. And I had a small little hint of electronic music through finding like little old records in my brother's collection, like Front 242, industrial, some Nitzer Ebb stuff, and I knew I was drawn to that sound. For me, I liked synthetic, and I couldn't find it, I guess, in the entire Texas sphere. So as soon as I got to Detroit area, I went from this complete rock spectrum to now like a drum machine-based electronic spectrum, and that really just opened my mind.
I mean, for me, growing up in Tennessee, 13 years and being this Arab kid in this Southern Baptist universe around Gulf War I, I spent a lot of time in my room, needless to say. And for me, it was a lot about sitting in my room with my 4-track cassette player, grabbing sounds, recording sounds, and putting them on this 4-track cassette player, and dumping 3 tracks down to 1 over and over and over, and all the sounds bleeding into each other and getting really mushy and messy. And I would just create these kind of imaginary film scores for movies that hadn't been made, But in my mind, it was always like, oh, I want to score a film, and so I would score the film of the life I hadn't yet led.
What was the first memory that each one of you have of making something and it felt really good? Not just like I'm making something and I feel like I'm struggling or I'm experimenting, but you made it and you got to the end of it and you went, oh, that felt really good.
I thought everything I did was great at that time. And you look back and it's not. But it was a learning experience. Yeah. I needed that confidence and that sense of, I'm going to make it. This is great. It sounds so good. Mm-hmm. And then you go back and it's all like demo presets and, just like bad poems, that you're trying to write. But it's part of the process. You needed that expulsion. You needed to get rid of all that stuff to get to where you needed to be.
Yeah. It's hard for me to put my finger on a first thing that I felt really good about. But there was a Putney synthesizer in the basement of Oberlin College. And I remember one night just sitting down in the basement, like, connecting things, and suddenly this strange, like, little arpeggio began to sound. And I remember just, like, twisting the filters and just playing, and not even understanding what was happening, and hearing the sound morph and change and torque and tweak and get brittle and then get fat and nasty. I just remember that moment being like, I think I could do this forever.
Yeah, you search for that moment.
Yeah.
And it happens at the most random times. But when it happens, that's it. Yeah. And that's what you draw from, and that's what you take that moment, whether you record it or sample it, and then that becomes a building block for something greater.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For me, I feel like the stories we tell and the experiences we present are like this little ship floating on an ocean. And everything underneath, all those subterranean thoughts and emotions, somehow that's the domain of the music. Okay. Like the music knows what's happened, it knows what's going to happen. It's sort of like the Jungian collective unconscious in a way. Like the music has access to all that stuff. The story, it's like the little ship on top that just bobs and weaves and goes down. And so for me, somehow the creative act is about getting into the depths. And that's where music can go. That's where the sounds and the textures can go. If you get that right collection of noises, it suggests so much, but it can never be pinned down. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm.
I do it to just let things out. It's so therapeutic. It's just so rewarding. I think I've always made music for myself, but the goal is always to make it open-ended. Yeah. So where you can have an experience with it that is vastly different than everyone else's experience with it. But I don't want the stories to be so firm. I don't want them to tell you where to go. So take it and do what you want, Make it your own.
Michael and I just had this experience coming over here. We were listening to Beams on the way over, and we were both in it. We were both totally like silent and nodding our heads. And I was also just like listening to your lyrics and be like, what the fuck is he talking about? It's kind of haunting lyrics, but I'm like, God, my dumb brain cannot access these lyrics. I don't.
But and I felt like you think that? Does it
well,
make
that's
you...
the thing. I felt this urge to create a story out of it, to be like, okay, this is a story of like a robot looking for love or something.
Perfect. That's what I love.
What were you intending?
Just.
I'm thinking of Her Fantasy.
I'm intending what you just did. making up your own storyline for the song based on lyrics that are somewhat ambiguous. And, you know, I guess I don't like hard truths. I don't like telling people, you know, this is this is that. So the fact that you just kind of came up with this whole scenario in your head, you're making the mental movie, and you're making the video in your mind about what you think it should be about.
There's a lot of research about people who get dementia and degradation in a certain left part of their brain. Just not the entire left part of the brain, but sort of in the sort of a part of the cortex that's responsible for language and responsible for sort of attention and planning. And what ends up happening, oddly, in some of these cases, is that suddenly they become painters, they become sculptors. They just like burst into artistic creativity. They become gripped by the need to create. And because some other part of their brain is suddenly rushing forward. And it's not as simple as left-right brain, it's much more complex than that. But there is some sort of relationship between the language part of your brain and the other part, the part that dreams, the part that makes strange associations, the part that's somehow inaccessible to you. That when the language part goes away, this other part steps forward, and some of this scientific research seems to indicate that like this part of your brain is actually performing an inhibitory. It's tamping down on the other part in order so that you can get through the day and you can have conversations and you can make your grocery lists. And there is a way in which I think about that sometimes when we're telling stories at Radiolab, and that you have to fight to make these stories make sense. Every story wants so badly to suck, and you have to make it not suck. You have to just fight it, go 10 rounds with it, and pull it into some sort of coherence. But in doing that, you're giving this part of your brain so much power. And I sometimes wonder, like, what if I could just like take one of those like Novocaine, just get right there and like shut it down a little bit, and what would happen? And I've had that experience in the last 24 hours watching you kind of operate. Not to say that you're a purely right-brain person, but
I'm very demented, so.
You seem perfectly, articulate, and nothing wrong with your language part, but you are engaging a different mode when you create. I hear it in your music too, that there's a sort of the way that you're putting lyrics together, it feels almost like dream logic, not storytelling logic.
Yeah.
How much of your work do you feel is story-driven? I mean, do you think about narrative and story?
Yeah. I think that's lyricism, that's almost like being able to write a mini novel. You can do that if you really know how to structure things like that. And Radiolab, I think, is very, you can tell an amazing story. But for me, I think I like to go somewhere else, a bit more, I guess, subversive, or just somewhere deeper in the subconscious, where, like I said, I just put it out there.
Yeah.
And there are these little feelings and beacons that people can grab and make their own story with.
Yeah.
But Matthew, you may have not felt like you've written in narrative. You've certainly written in character.
Oh, absolutely. I think the whole thing's a character.
Tell me more about that character.
It's part of that therapy, where I can go somewhere else. When I'm in the studio and I'm playing upon those feelings and that person, you really draw upon the most extreme versions of yourself. Certain songs, like You Put a Smell on Me, for example, just on Black City, I had that synthesis, or the arpeggiator from Poly6 synthesizer. And I just was, like on the keyboard here, just kind of noodling around, and you get that lock, and it's just like, whoa, like there's that moment. Like that, I have to make a song out of that. And then you hear that and you start thinking, okay, what does it sound like? What is that making me feel like? And it started getting very sexual and very just like gritty and raw. And so I started writing this song about this character who's just he's got a very single track mind. He's just thinking about one thing, you know.
It's almost predatory.
Very predatory. Get in my car, let's drive around, get in my car, you know, let's like have fun. Let's go turn up the music, get in my car. Like you keep coming back to this cyclical like thing, and that's that guy. And it's part of me. I mean, that's me, I guess, but it's not me all the time.
Really interesting. Is that your way of dealing with that part of you, or is that?
I think dealing, I don't know,
Not
dealing makes it sound
dealing
like there's
makes it
something
sound-
wrong with
right,
it.
Right, right,
But it's, I don't know, because I don't want to walk around like wearing leather pants and, you know, trying to like just seduce people.
Yeah, because I mean, having known you
But
now.
part of me wants to do that all the time.
Really? Because I've known you for 24 hours, and that whole vibration is just I don't get it.
I haven't gone there with you. But no, I mean, that allows you the freedom. That's art, you know. You get to be somebody else for a little bit.
We can go real loud, we can go real far. I got a radio in my big black car. We can go all night if you wanna go far. You decide if you want to come, take a ride with me.
So your work brings a lot back to you. So you make it, it goes out, it pings back. And it pings back through other people. You know, have you ever discovered something about yourself through that ping back?
On all extremes, really. You know, there are times when we've put something out into the world and it's really resonated with people. We hear back. And there have been times when I think we've done stuff and I've put something out, fairly certain of the thing I've just made, and then the reaction is not at all what we expected, and it reveals to me some kind of blind spot. Not just in myself as a storyteller, but in myself as a person. I think, oh, you know, it was surprising to me how little I could have predicted how this would land. And that makes it really interesting, and it makes it really fun, because every piece of work that you do, the moment you see it register in somebody else, it's kind of a mirror back on you in some way. And the fact that people use the work that we do in ways we don't expect creates a sense of your own smallness, because you couldn't have predicted it, but it also makes the world feel so big and full of possibilities to know that you can never predict how this stuff is going to work.
I was playing in London once, and a girl brought me a flower and said that Asa Breed got her through the passing of her father. And that album really allowed her to deal with, you know, the things that she needed to deal with and to get happy. And that is, I mean, that's beyond all of this. You know, that the ability that she could take the music and make that hers, I mean, that's a great success. Not that I wanted that to happen. I never dreamed that that would happen, but I mean, that's beyond gear, that's beyond the house, that's beyond everything else.
How do you think about the toolkit and the opportunities that it provides you?
I mean, the amount of software that I have on my computer, if you were to turn each one of those little modules into a physical box, could probably line the back of this theater. You know, there's something to that. There's also something very negative that can come from that. You have too many options.
Yeah, more is just more at a certain point.
Yeah, but if you really limit yourself, sometimes when I create a song, I like to set up an environment that would mimic a studio in real life. You know, so let's limit yourself to, you know, one compressor, one reverb, one delay, and treat it like you're just going to work with something in real life. And if you put these limitations on yourself, you're not going to get too, I guess, carried away with it.
I really connect with what you're saying about this idea of like you have to introduce a little bit of anarchy into the tools, because the tools have a sort of an inherent bias towards precision and perfection, And if you sort of just, if you indulge that too much, you do end up with a overly sanitized experience. For me, what's always been really exciting is the idea that you can take something from the physical world and you can have it in a place where you can make it surreal, you can make it slightly strange, and you arrive at this weird tension between the acoustic and the electronic, between some sort of organic sound and something inorganic. And for me, there's something really beautiful in that simple juxtaposition. It's in a way the sort of like secret, very simple logic of everything I do in the show. It's to create sounds that are drawn from the familiar but then made strange. Because the world is strange. You know, human experience is weird if you sort of cock your head sideways. It's full of wonder, and it's also full of fear and full of oddness. And the sounds, for me, should always evoke that. They should embody that. And so I love to take the sound of someone's voice, simple speaking, and then you pitch it down 2 octaves, and suddenly it's demonic and stretched out. You run it through some kind of granular synthesis, and like a consonant can become a whole landscape, a whole drone.
You're listening to Radio Lab.
Radio Lab.
From
WNYC.
See?
Yeah.
And embedded in that drone is something familiar. Some kind of human imprint is in there, but you're suddenly in an alien landscape of sound. And that, for me, is so exciting. To be able to manipulate the world we live in and to create something that feels slightly askew.
There must be a sense of science going on. Like there's got to be something in the brain happening when you hear a human voice pitched down 2 octaves. Because a lot of the frequencies that you're accustomed to are there, but they're different. So maybe they take you to like a dream state. Maybe these are places that you live more when you're unconscious or asleep.
Reality can be overwhelming. It can also be a shadow. Depending on how you look at it. As for me, I wondered what this hollow might have looked like. But Lord, this famous creature rolling in the muck. It damned my soul of tempting statuesque beauty.
Both of you are doing a lot with playing with voice. And kind of how that causes comfort and discomfort and brings in character or changes location so do those introduce problems of authenticity with kind of the telling when you do that much manipulation?
I mean, the word authenticity is always an interesting one.
Because it's such a cudgel for anything that has associations with journalism.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's something we struggle with it in a million different ways. Struggle is that's not maybe the right word, but it's a question which is always looming for us, and people pose to us a lot, which is the banter scripted? Is it real? Are these sounds recorded on the site? Are they journalistic? Like these soundscapes and imaginary worlds you're creating, are they acts of imagination, or are they actually truth? And I sort of enjoy all those questions in some way, and I ignore them at the same time. And for me, when just on the most simple level, I feel like the only way to be authentic right now is to be absolutely transparent with the artifice. You know, is to be able to see that like there's a cameraman here. We're sitting in chairs. This is not a natural situation that we've created, but we're having a natural conversation. But in some sense, you have to be, I think the only way to be authentic is to just show people that, you know? But for me, there are moments when, like when I'm listening to an interview, not when I'm telling a story, not at the very beginning, when you're doing an interview or when you're listening to the tape and it's just you and you've got the headphones on and you're hearing someone's voice. Who you are, you almost disappear. In some sense, that person takes you over. You know, they inhabit your ego. And it's such a deep act of listening to just kind of lean into somebody so deeply. That's amazing to me. That's amazing to me. I love those moments. It happens when you're interviewing, it happens when you're listening to an interview. It happens when you're just by yourself creating the sounds and the noises. I imagine it happens for you in the studio where you, in a sense, disappear, you know? I don't know, does that at all resonate?
Yeah, I mean, just to touch on what you were saying, though, I saw that happen firsthand yesterday. You know, when he was interviewing somebody at the design center, and I was totally just like, whoa. Like, I saw you go somewhere else completely. And it's such a skill, but you don't make it look like a skill. You make it look so natural. And it was fascinating to watch how easily he could just, you know, parasitic would be the wrong word, but it's almost like he just becomes this extension of the person he's interviewing.
Parasitic's not a bad word.
Yeah.
There is something kind of parasitic about it. I mean,
a healthy parasite.
You're trying to suck the blood of the person you're interviewing in some sense.
But it was a very healthy experience just to see him, and you could tell the person kind of just, they unfold, you know?
You know, I really wanted to talk about, simply said, I wanted to talk about love. Like, what do you love about what you're doing right now? I mean, not in this immediate moment, but about your work right now.
I mean, this right here, just the ideas that you can, I guess, just do something completely new. And I feel like I'm at a stage right now where I can, you know, hook up with you and Jad and do a project like this where you just go out in the city and record sound, and it's so open-ended. There's no right or wrong answer. Let's just get together and do something. And it's for the sake of creation. I love the freedoms. I love, I guess, the unknown.
Like, I have to be totally honest. The part of this whole experience that I found, like, secretly kind of terrifying was that, like, we're going to stand over here and make something. And we've had all of, like, 5 minutes to think about it, you know? Then we were doing it earlier, and I thought it was just, like, it was shockingly fun, you know? And suddenly on the other end of it, I was like, wow, to see how you were working and to see how you were sort of synthesizing things in the moment, you just feel different after that. It changes you, you know?
I think you realize once you've set up enough technical know-how and you've set up enough skills that you can, not to say you can get away with anything, but you almost can. And get away, not like you're robbing somebody. You're not shorting anybody. You're really just, there's no wrong answer at that point. Whatever you do is something.
In a way, that idea of you have to put yourself in positions where you're doing genuine experiments. Not experiments in the scientific sense where there are controls and you're changing just one variable, but like in the most basic sense, which is that you don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to do an experiment because the outcome is unknown to me. And the outcome might very well suck. It might be bad. The only knowledge you have about what it means to make something is to walk this long period of searching and sucking, and where it's uncomfortable. And so one of the questions I'm asking myself is, how do I do that now, where you don't abandon your core sense of what you do and your audience wants certain things from you? How do you continue to walk that path, but not just simply blow yourself up completely? Yeah. Which would feel irresponsible in some way too. So.
I mean, that's the same thing with me. Change reflects structures that you have to abandon. Mm-hmm. You know, I have a band and I have systems in place that you spend a good year perfecting. You know the best way to do something, and then to move on to another project, like Audion now, for example, really you kind of, it's like you did all this work and then it pays off, but shouldn't you keep doing that? You know, should I keep perfecting that model? But I think change to me is a necessity. You know, to answer your first question, change is the thing. You have to change.
But allowing yourself moments of genuine terror, yeah. You know, in when you venture into the unknown, when you do an experiment, but keeping that sense of play, So having a sort of smile on your face as you wander into a moment that could actually really suck. And that's part of what's really cool about this whole scenario is, you know, wander into something that's far more open-ended than I experience in my daily life. You know, anything could happen when we make stuff together. Anything can happen as we're recording sounds. It just feels like the rules are redefined for a moment. And so searching out more and more of these kinds of experiences, I think, is what needs to happen, you know?